Hello besties, today we are doing a 3D mermaid tail with ink swirls on a glass tumbler. Hello besties, let's get started with our mermaid tail mold. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, this design kind of was like an experiment that actually worked. So I'm kind of excited to show you guys how this works. So anyway, I am going to start with using some micas to kind of coat the bottom of my mold here. I'm using a purple mica and a pink mica from CCDIY and just using my brush to brush it onto the bottom of the mold. And I'm just going to use a little bit, goes a long way. So just kind of brush it in there and then use a paper towel to dab out any excess. I'm going to be mixing 20 mLs of epoxy, but if you want an exact measurement, you can always fill up your mold with water and then pour it back in your cup so you know exactly how much to use. I will be adding some chunky glitter to my epoxy and then sprinkling some in the bottom of my mold. I will also be using purple and blue alcohol inks to kind of give it some more color and more dimension in my mermaid tail. You can pop bubbles using a heat gun. You can also use a lighter, but please be very careful not to catch it on fire. Please, please, please. And also, I am using Fast Set by CCDIY, so it does set pretty quickly, so you kind of have to watch it. I let my epoxy sit until it was almost cured. Not all the way. You want it to be still a little bit gummy so you can put it on your cup and it lays on the curve. Do not let it completely cure or else you won't be able to curve it onto your cup and it'll sit it'll sit flat, so it'll have gaps in the side. So you'll kind of see in the next cut, you'll see that I've already demolded it and I'm kind of trimming up any sharp edges because sometimes, you know, like your mold has little sharp edges and it's still very flexible. It's still kind of gummy. If you look at my glass right there, like you can see where I placed it, it's still kind of gummy-ish. So I'm using UV resin from CCDIY to apply my tail. I kind of added too much, so it's kind of squirting out the sides, but it's okay. We can clean it up. So I took my time kind of to clean it. Remember, UV does not cure until it is under the light. So you have plenty of time to work. Just kind of push your tail on there. That's why I'm telling you that you have to remove your mold before it's completely cured. It still has to be a little bit flexible so you can mold it onto your tumbler or your glass tumbler. So I'm going to go ahead and cure this baby until it's nice and set, and I'm going to apply some pressure with my fingers. This video is obviously sped up, but I cured it for about 3 minutes or so, making sure that all the little corners are adhered and pressing down firmly. So after this step, then we're going to apply a coat of epoxy. Make sure that you do a very thin coat because micro bubbles tend to show up more and glass. I also added a little bit of glitter additive to my epoxy so it can kind of hide some of those micro bubbles or any imperfections, plus give it a little bit of shimmer. So after this coat is completely dry, we're going to go right into our second coat of epoxy where we're going to be adding the inks. So now we're going in with our second coat of epoxy here, and I am going to first apply it all around my cup again. I didn't even bother with sanding it. If there was a couple of bubbles or like really big bumps, I might have just knocked them off a little bit, but I really did not mess with it. So after you apply your epoxy, you want to go ahead and torch out all the bubbles and then set your torch aside because you're not going to use it again. You do not want to mix torching and alcohol inks. So next I'm going to grab a couple of blues in alcohol inks, and I'm just going to add a little bit to the lower side of my tumbler. Don't go too crazy. You want to have some control over it. If it does roll over to your tail, it's completely okay. It's just kind of like the water effect. It's kind of hard to see because the football is blue and green, so it's kind of hard to see where the water ends and starts. But if you want to get a better feel for it, add some like paper towels in there so you can see it better. But I'm just adding a little bit of droplets, letting the turner do its thing, and I'm also grabbing my heat gun to manipulate my inks a little bit where I want them to go. Next, we're going to be adding the white alcohol ink, guys. When I tell you guys a little goes a long way, a little goes a long way. White and black and gold and silver are super dramatic, and you really need to use just a tiny little bit. So here I am pushing my alcohol inks where I want them. I want them to kind of look kind of wavy, kind of swirly, like the beach, like the waves. So I'm going to let it spin and use my heat gun going different ways. Remember, we're trying to keep our inks on the bottom half of our tumbler. I did fail to mention that this coat of epoxy is actually artist resin. I'm not using fast set. I don't like to use fast set when I'm using alcohol inks because I like my inks to swirl. I'm using my little stir stick here to kind of move it around, kind of give it some wavy action, and then going to hit it with the heat gun again. So after this step and after your inks are doing its thing, I am going to go and sprinkle it with some chunky glitter just to give it a little extra pop. This is completely optional. I just like the look of a little bit of extra oomph in my design. So you're going to see me in a second adding some chunky glitter. Here I am with the heat gun. Guys, don't be like me. Just put the heat gun down. Sometimes I overdo it. I just never know when to put it down. So if you are questioning yourself, then just put the heat gun away. So anyway, here I am finally adding my chunky glitter. I am sprinkling it with my hand to not overdo it. And after this step, you want it completely cured. Sand it lightly and put your last coat of epoxy, or if you're going to do a decal and then do a coat of epoxy. So while our inks swirl and our epoxy cures, we're going to go ahead and bling out the lid. I love these little bamboo lids. They look great on their own like this, but of course we're going to bling it out. I am using a rhinestone mix of some pearls and some little pink and white rhinestones. I think it's just perfect for this design. Looks very mermaidish, kind of looks like bubbles too. I am using liquid fusion to adhere my rhinestones. That is my glue of choice. I love it. It works for basically anything. I love it. It's easy to work with and it dries fairly quickly, but not too quickly. So I'm also going to go around the rim and rhinestone that as well. It is completely optional, but of course, I want to do the mostest. Look how cute it is. It's going to look so perfect. And now for the final reveal. Look how cute she is. I love how simple but beautiful this tumbler turned out. I'm glad my experiment worked. I'm super satisfied. And here you can tell in the tail where the micas and the glitters kind of pop. I love it. And of course the bling lid. I am obsessed. I hope this tutorial was helpful and I hope you are inspired to create your own 3D mermaid tail tumbler. I just want to say thank you to all our Patreon members. Thank you for your support. It means the world to us. Make sure you check us out on all our socials and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We upload videos every Wednesday and Friday. Till next time, bye.